John Cena's career wasn't just about overcoming the odds. It was about surviving an escalating nightmare of increasingly dangerous opponents who each brought their own brand of mayhem. From literal monsters who communicated through violence to Hollywood megastars who exposed him as a tribute act, this is the story of how Cena survived 7 distinct levels of rivals, each more dangerous than the last. But there's one secret level that nearly destroyed him, and it's not who you think it is. Watch until the end to find out. Level 1. Umaga. Umaga arrived as a legitimately massive Samoan monster who treated wrestling matches like hunting expeditions. This wasn't your typical bad guy who showed up to cut 20-minute promos about his childhood trauma. This was a walking nightmare who made his entrance looking like he'd rather be eating raw meat in a jungle somewhere. The guy had wild hair, tribal tattoos covering his massive frame, and eyes that suggested he viewed wrestling rings as his personal feeding ground. His running hip attack in the corner wasn't just a wrestling move, it was basically a building demolition technique that happened to be legal in professional wrestling. What made things worse for Cena was how Umaga completely destroyed his usual 5 moves of doom comeback sequence. The 5-knuckle shuffle, which worked perfectly fine against normal human beings, suddenly looked like the worst possible life choice against this monster. Cena would go for his big comeback, and Umaga would just stand there like he was swatting away an annoying fly. The attitude adjustment became less about showing off Cena's strength, and more about whether he could lift this beast without getting his spine snapped in half. They fought at New Year's Revolution 2007, and again in the Royal Rumble 2007 Last Man Standing match, which underlined just how physical and brutal Umaga really was. Their last man standing encounter became less about wrestling technique and more about who could endure the most punishment without dying on live television. Cena found himself using chairs, tables, and anything else he could find just to keep this beast at a safe distance. The match felt more like a horror movie where the hero keeps hitting the monster with everything he can find, but nothing seems to slow it down. What made Umaga terrifying was his unpredictability throughout every single encounter. You never knew if he was going to wrestle you or just straight up maul you, like you'd wandered into his territory by mistake. Sometimes he'd follow basic wrestling rules, and other times he'd ignore them completely and just start destroying everything in sight. The Samoan Spike wasn't just a finishing move, it was a promise that your night was about to end badly and possibly in an ambulance. Umaga would load up his thumb like he was preparing to perform surgery, except the surgery involved jamming it into your throat until you stopped moving. The move looked so vicious that you wondered if WWE's legal team had approved it, or if everyone was just too scared to tell Umaga he couldn't do it. Umaga forced Cena to abandon his comfort zone and fight like his life depended on it every single time they stepped in the ring together. This was Cena's introduction to the fact that being WWE champion meant facing literal monsters who didn't care about your catchphrases, your merchandise sales, or your connection with the audience. But surviving a monster was just the beginning of Cena's problems. Level 2. AJ Styles. The next threat came from a completely different angle. AJ Styles walked into WWE in 2016 with a resume that made Cena's look like community college compared to Harvard. This was the guy who had main evented in Japan, carried TNA wrestling on his back for years, and proven himself in every major promotion except WWE. While Cena had spent years perfecting his established moveset, Styles had been tearing it up in promotions around the world where technical wrestling ability carried more weight than merchandise sales. AJ Styles showed up with indie darling credentials that made the internet wrestling community lose their collective minds. When he walked through those ropes, he brought with him a level of technical skill that exposed new wrinkles in Cena's approach and forced him to actually try for once, instead of relying on his established formula. This was everything the internet wrestling community had been begging for since Cena became the face of WWE. A technically superior opponent who could challenge Cena's limitations without needing a storyline about family drama or personal vendettas. Styles didn't need to attack Cena's character or his personal life. He just needed to wrestle circles around him, and that's exactly what he did from day one. Their first encounter at Money in the Bank 2016 proved that Styles could make Cena's usual power-based offense look outdated. When Cena went for his typical comeback sequence, Styles countered it with moves that most WWE fans had never seen before. The Styles clash alone was more innovative than anything Cena had added to his arsenal in the previous 5 years. Styles hit a clean win at Money in the Bank 2016, repeated at SummerSlam, and their trilogy closed with Cena's Royal Rumble 2017 title win. Styles brought a level of athleticism and ring psychology that turned every match into a chess game where Styles was playing with a full set of pieces while Cena was trying to win with just pawns and a king. The speed difference was obvious, the technical gap was embarrassing, and worst of all for Cena, the crowd was eating it up. The phenomenal forearm became Cena's kryptonite because it could come out of nowhere and end his night instantly, unlike his opponent's finishing moves that required long setups. Styles could hit it off the ropes, out of counters, or during Cena's own offensive sequences. It was like fighting someone who could end the match at any moment while you needed perfect conditions just to attempt your own finish. What made their trilogy special was watching Cena adapt his entire wrestling style to match someone who could out-wrestle him in every category. Cena started incorporating new moves, changing his timing, and actually selling his opponent's offense like it hurt. For the first time in years, John Cena looked like he was learning during matches instead of just going through his established routine. Their Royal Rumble 2017 match became a masterclass in how to make John Cena look vulnerable without making him look weak or unworthy of his position. Styles pushed Cena to his absolute limits while keeping the match competitive enough that Cena's eventual victory felt earned rather than predetermined. Styles proved that the best way to elevate Cena was to bring legitimate wrestling credibility that he couldn't just overcome with hustle, loyalty, and respect alone. But physical superiority was nothing compared to what came next. Cena was about to face an opponent who understood that the most devastating attacks don't happen in the ring. Level 3. CM Punk. CM Punk realized the best way to destroy John Cena wasn't through wrestling moves or physical violence. It was through words that cut deeper than any finishing move ever could. Punk figured out that Cena's biggest weakness wasn't his limited moveset or his questionable acting ability. His biggest weakness was that everything he said sounded like it came from a corporate script written by a committee of middle-aged executives who had never been in a real fight. Punk's famous pipe bomb promo didn't just attack Cena's character or his wrestling ability. It attacked everything Cena represented in WWE and everything the company had become under his leadership. When Punk sat cross-legged on that stage on June 27, 2011, and started talking, he wasn't just cutting a wrestling promo, he was performing surgery on the entire WWE system with Cena as the primary target. Every word was carefully chosen to expose the artificial nature of everything Cena stood for. This was psychological warfare disguised as professional wrestling, and Cena was completely outgunned on the microphone from the very first exchange. Punk had spent years perfecting his ability to speak from the heart, while Cena had spent years perfecting his ability to deliver whatever lines the writers gave him that week. The contrast was embarrassing. Punk sounded like he was speaking his truth, while Cena sounded like he was reading from a teleprompter. What happened was clear to anyone watching. Punk made Cena's scripted babyface promos look like amateur hour compared to his raw, unfiltered hatred that felt genuine and personal. When Cena talked about never giving up, it sounded like a motivational poster. When Punk talked about being held down by the company, it sounded like a man fighting for his professional life. The difference in passion and authenticity was obvious to everyone in the arena. Their feud became less about who could wrestle better and more about who could verbally destroy the other person's entire existence on live television. Every segment turned into Punk systematically dismantling everything Cena claimed to represent. Punk would point out the hypocrisy of Cena's good guy image, while Cena would respond with the same tired catchphrases he'd been using for years. It wasn't even a fair fight. Money in the Bank 2011 turned into Cena's worst nightmare when he stepped into his own company and hurt a crowd that actively wanted him to lose. The Chicago crowd treated Punk like a hometown hero and Cena like an invading villain. This was supposed to be Cena's house, but Punk had turned it into hostile territory just by speaking the truth about how the fans really felt. Punk's 2011 contract situation added real stakes to their Money in the Bank encounter, making it feel like more than just another championship match. Punk's straight-edge lifestyle became the perfect contrast to Cena's corporate-approved good guy image that felt manufactured and focus-tested. Punk didn't drink, smoke, or do drugs because of his personal beliefs. Cena didn't do those things because his contract probably said he couldn't. Punk's moral compass came from within, while Cena's seemed to come from whatever would sell the most t-shirts to kids. Every promo battle felt like watching a professional debater destroy a high school student who only knew catchphrases and hand gestures. Punk would make complex arguments about the state of the wrestling business, while Cena would respond with variations of the same speech he'd been giving since 2005. The intellectual gap was as wide as the Grand Canyon. The real genius was how Punk used Cena's own success against him, making him look like a corporate puppet instead of a wrestling hero. Every accomplishment became evidence of favoritism rather than earned achievement. Punk proved that the most dangerous opponent isn't someone who can beat you up. It's someone who can make you question everything you believe about yourself. But after surviving someone who could destroy you with words, Cena was about to face a different kind of challenge entirely. Level 4. Randy Orton. Randy Orton became Cena's most reliable enemy simply because WWE couldn't think of anyone else to put in main events for over a decade. What happened was pretty straightforward. WWE Creative would sit in their weekly meetings, look at the calendar, and realize they needed a main event for the next pay-per-view. Someone would inevitably suggest Cena versus Orton because it was the safest possible choice. They knew these two could work together without botching moves, injuring each other, or walking out of the company halfway through a storyline. Their rivalry lasted so long that it started feeling like they were just trading wins like they were playing tennis at a country club. One month, Cena would win clean. The next month, Orton would get his victory back. And then they'd repeat the process with slightly different stipulations. The pattern became so predictable that fans could set their calendars by it. Summer meant it was time for another Cena-Orton feud because WWE had run out of fresh ideas again. Orton perfected the art of being Cena's go-to opponent whenever creative had absolutely no other ideas for storylines. He became wrestling's version of a reliable utility player who could fill any role the company needed. Heel turn? Orton could do it. Face turn? He could handle that too. Need someone to carry a feud for 3 months while bigger stars were injured or busy? Orton was your guy. It wasn't necessarily because he was the best choice, but because he was always available and willing to work. The RKO became wrestling's most overused finishing move because it happened to Cena roughly every 3 months for 10 years straight. Fans started joking that the RKO was less of a surprise attack and more of a scheduled appointment that Cena kept forgetting about. Orton could hit it out of nowhere, which made it effective, but when you see the same finish happen dozens of times against the same opponent, it loses some of its impact. What made their feud memorable wasn't the wrestling matches themselves, though those were solid enough. It was moments like Orton punting Cena's father at ringside during their 2007 rivalry at Unforgiven. That single act of violence gave their feud genuine emotional weight that transcended typical championship disputes. Suddenly, this wasn't just about who was the better wrestler. It was about Orton crossing lines that made the conflict feel personal and real. They feuded so many times that fans could predict exactly how each match would end based on which month it was scheduled. If it was leading into a bigger pay-per-view, Orton would probably win. If it was the actual pay-per-view, Cena would likely get his win back. The booking became so formulaic that it felt like WWE was running the same program on repeat with minor variations. Orton's heel turns and face turns were timed perfectly to coincide with whenever WWE needed a new Cena opponent for their upcoming storylines. His character alignment would shift based on what the company needed, rather than what made sense for his character development. One day, he'd be a villain attacking Cena. 6 months later, he'd be a hero teaming with him. And then he'd be back to being evil again when they ran out of other heel options. Their chemistry was undeniable, but it was the kind of chemistry that came from doing the same thing over and over again until they perfected it. They knew each other's timing, each other's moves, and each other's strengths and weaknesses better than most married couples. This familiarity made their matches smooth and professional, but it also made them feel predictable. The legacy storyline gave their feud new life by adding actual personal stakes beyond just wanting each other's championship. But even reliable opponents eventually get overshadowed when someone with genuine star power decides to make a comeback. Level 5. The Rock. The Rock's return to WWE was basically Hollywood coming back to remind everyone what real star power actually looked like after years away from wrestling. When The Rock walked back through those curtains in 2011, he brought with him the kind of mainstream credibility that Cena had spent his entire career trying to achieve. The man had conquered Hollywood with blockbuster movies like the Fast and Furious franchise, making him a global icon who transcended professional wrestling. Every single appearance felt like a special event, because audiences knew they were watching someone who could choose to be anywhere in the world, but decided to come back and wrestle. Their first confrontation made it painfully obvious that Cena was essentially a tribute act to the original People's Champion, who had done everything first and better. When they stood face to face for the first time in years, the contrast was shocking. The Rock carried himself like someone who belonged on movie screens and red carpets, while Cena looked like he was trying too hard to prove he deserved to be in the same ring. The confidence gap was massive and visible to everyone watching. Rock's charisma was so far beyond Cena's that it felt like watching a movie star debate with a community theater actor who had memorized his lines but couldn't match the natural presence. The Rock could make throwing his hat into the crowd seem like the most important moment of the night, while Cena's biggest gestures felt calculated and focus-tested. When The Rock spoke, he commanded attention effortlessly. When Cena responded, it sounded like he was delivering corporate-approved talking points designed by a marketing committee. The build to WrestleMania became less about wrestling matches and more about proving who deserved to be called the face of WWE during this era. This wasn't just about championship belts or winning streaks. This was about legitimacy, mainstream appeal, and who could truly represent the company on the biggest stage possible. The Rock had already proven himself in Hollywood, while Cena was still trying to break through to that next level of fame. Rock's part-time schedule somehow made him feel more important than Cena, who showed up every single week to perform for the same audiences. The scarcity of Rock's appearances created an event atmosphere that Cena's regular presence couldn't match. Fans knew that seeing The Rock might be their only chance for months or even years, while they could count on seeing Cena the following week. This made every Rock appearance feel precious and unmissable. Their promos turned into masterclasses in how natural charisma beats scripted corporate speak every single time they grabbed microphones. The Rock would improvise and draw from his real-life experiences, making everything sound authentic and spontaneous. Cena would deliver his rehearsed material competently, but it always sounded like material that had been approved by multiple departments before he was allowed to say it on television. WrestleMania 28 was supposed to be Cena's crowning moment, where he finally defeated the legend and proved himself worthy. Instead, it proved that some legends can't be replaced no matter how hard the company tries to create new ones. The Rock's victory drew over 1 million pay-per-view buys and reminded everyone why he had been called the People's Champion in the first place. The rematch at WrestleMania 29 felt like WWE desperately trying to fix the damage from the year before by giving Cena his redemption victory. Rock's Hollywood commitments made every appearance feel like a special event that Cena could never replicate as a full-time performer. This feud exposed the harsh reality that Cena was WWE's biggest star by default, not because he was actually bigger than The Rock. But surviving a legend's comeback was nothing compared to facing someone who understood that the most effective attacks don't happen during matches. Level 6. Edge. Edge figured out that the best way to beat Superman wasn't through strength or athletic ability. It was by attacking his personal life and sanity until he broke down completely. While other wrestlers tried to outmuscle Cena or out-wrestle him in the ring, Edge took a completely different approach. He studied Cena's weaknesses and realized that the biggest weakness wasn't physical at all. It was Cena's need to be the good guy who always did the right thing, even when it cost him everything. The Money in the Bank cash-in at New Year's Revolution 2006 became the blueprint for how to destroy John Cena's entire world in 30 seconds flat. What happened was simple but brilliant. Cena had just survived the Elimination Chamber match, one of the most brutal contests in wrestling. He was battered, exhausted, and barely able to stand when Edge's music hit. Edge walked down that ramp with a contract that guaranteed him a championship match whenever he wanted it. Cena couldn't refuse, couldn't postpone it, and couldn't prepare for it. Within minutes, Edge had stolen his first WWE Championship from a man who couldn't defend himself properly. Edge didn't just want to beat Cena in wrestling matches like every other competitor. He wanted to make Cena's life absolutely miserable in ways that went far beyond what happened inside the ring. This wasn't about proving who was the better wrestler or who deserved championship gold. This was about psychological torture disguised as professional wrestling. Edge wanted to break Cena's spirit and make him question whether being the hero was worth all the pain that came with it. Their feud escalated from championship matches to Edge literally showing up at Cena's house uninvited like some kind of stalker. The home invasion angle crossed every possible line of what should be considered acceptable behavior. Edge didn't just attack Cena during wrestling shows. He brought the fight to Cena's personal space and confronted his father in his own home. This made every moment of Cena's life feel unsafe, because Edge could show up anywhere at any time. The leader relationship angle proved that sometimes the most effective weapon against a hero is public humiliation that destroys his reputation. Edge used his real-life relationship with Lita to create storylines that made Cena look foolish and naive. This wasn't just about winning matches anymore. This was about making Cena look weak and stupid in front of millions of people who looked up to him as a role model. Edge's timing was so perfect that he could ruin Cena's biggest moments just by existing in the right place at the right time with his briefcase. Every major victory Cena achieved came with the knowledge that Edge might be waiting in the back to steal it away. This created a constant state of anxiety, where Cena could never fully enjoy his success because Edge was always lurking somewhere nearby. TLC matches became Edge's specialty because they allowed him to use weapons and environment against Cena's raw power advantage. Their Unforgiven 2006 TLC match showcased Edge's strategic brilliance and willingness to push both their bodies to the limit. In a regular wrestling match, Cena's strength and size gave him a clear advantage. But when tables, ladders, and chairs got involved, Edge could level the playing field and use his intelligence to overcome Cena's physical advantages. These matches became wars of attrition where Edge's cunning mattered more than Cena's muscles. The psychological warfare reached its peak when Edge made Cena question whether being a good guy was worth all the suffering it brought him. Every cash-in felt like a horror movie jump scare that could happen whenever Cena thought he was safe and had earned his moment of triumph. Edge proved that the most dangerous opponent is someone who studies your weaknesses and attacks them when you're most vulnerable rather than when you're ready for a fight. But all of Edge's mind games and opportunistic tactics were nothing compared to facing someone who didn't need psychology or strategy to destroy you. Level 7. Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar represented everything John Cena wasn't during his entire WWE career. A legitimate fighter who didn't need catchphrases, bright colors, or crowd approval to prove his worth. When Lesnar walked to the ring, he didn't wave at fans or throw his shirt into the crowd. He looked like he was walking to work, and his work involved hurting people professionally. The contrast was stark and uncomfortable. Cena built his career on connecting with audiences through his personality and never give up attitude. Lesnar built his reputation by beating people unconscious in actual fights where losing meant getting seriously injured. Their 2012 Extreme Rules match proved that Cena's PG-era comfort zone was about to get brutally shattered in ways he wasn't prepared for. This wasn't going to be another wrestling match where both men traded moves back and forth until someone hit their finisher. Lesnar came to fight, and the blood that covered both men by the end told the whole story. Cena discovered that all his experience against wrestlers meant nothing when facing someone who had spent years learning how to hurt people for real. Lesnar's UFC credentials made every encounter feel less like wrestling and more like Cena was about to get murdered on live television. When Lesnar threw punches, they looked like they could knock someone out cold. When he applied submissions, they looked like they could snap bones if the referee didn't stop the match quickly enough. His background as a legitimate heavyweight fighter meant that everything he did carried the threat of serious injury. Cena's usual comeback sequences suddenly looked like desperate survival attempts against someone who could end his career with one bad landing. SummerSlam 2014 became a public execution where Lesnar ended Cena's year-plus championship reign in 15 minutes of pure violence that shocked everyone watching. This wasn't a competitive match where both men had their moments. This was Lesnar systematically destroying Cena piece by piece while the crowd watched in stunned silence. The match felt like watching a professional fighter beat up a regular person who happened to be wearing wrestling gear. The German suplexes weren't wrestling moves in the traditional sense. They were Lesnar's way of showing that Cena's strength meant absolutely nothing against someone with his technical background. Each suplex looked like it could break Cena's neck, and the fact that Lesnar hit 16 of them made it clear that he could have continued all night. Cena's usual power moves looked weak and ineffective compared to the raw violence Lesnar brought to every exchange. Even in 2025 during Cena's retirement tour, Lesnar returned at SummerSlam just to attack him after losing the title to Cody Rhodes. The message was clear. Even after all these years, even during Cena's farewell tour, Lesnar could still show up and dominate him whenever he wanted. Their final showdown at WrestlePalooza 2025 was billed as the end of their rivalry, but Lesnar dominated once again like no time had passed at all. Lesnar's part-time schedule somehow made him feel more dangerous than full-time wrestlers, because every appearance meant someone was getting destroyed. His limited dates created an atmosphere where fans knew that when Lesnar showed up, something bad was going to happen to whoever faced him. The Beast incarnate didn't care about storylines or character development. He just showed up to prove that Cena was still mortal. Lesnar became Cena's career-defining final boss because he represented the one type of opponent that Cena could never truly overcome through willpower alone. Against every other rival, Cena could eventually find a way to win through determination and heart. Against Lesnar, those qualities meant nothing when faced with superior athletic ability and legitimate fighting skills. But surviving all these physical threats and psychological warfare was nothing compared to the enemy that followed Cena everywhere he went for 15 years straight. Secret level, the invisible enemy. John Cena's most dangerous opponent wasn't another wrestler. It was the decade-long chorus of "Cena sucks" that followed him everywhere. This invisible enemy turned his own success against him, making even championship victories feel hollow when half the crowd rejected him. The dueling "Let's Go Cena" versus "Cena Sucks" became his career's soundtrack, creating a split that never healed. Children cheered while adults booed, ensuring he could never win over the entire crowd. Social media amplified the negativity, with fans constantly debating whether his success was earned or just corporate favoritism. Cena faced impossible expectations, being simultaneously a role model, top wrestler, and company spokesperson while dealing with relentless criticism. Critics dismissed his improvements and questioned whether his never-give-up message was genuine inspiration or just merchandise-selling propaganda. This invisible enemy revealed that sometimes your biggest rival is the mental pressure of carrying an entire company's hopes while maintaining positivity despite constant negativity. Unlike any physical opponent, this enemy could never be truly defeated, only endured. The next time someone says wrestling is fake, remind them that the psychological warfare Cena endured for 15 years was absolutely real. Like and subscribe for 1,000 years of luck. Until next time.